So thank you everybody for coming to the Leonia Public Library's Q&A. We have tonight with us, Deidre Breckenridge Scribola. I realize I should have asked you how to pronounce your name before this. And she is here tonight to talk about her book, A Whisper From Noelle. So the first 15 registrants of the program will receive a copy of this book. They're waiting for you at the library currently. And I thought I would start with maybe a little biography about Deidre. So, okay. Deidre Breckenridge is an author, entrepreneur, and CEO at Pure Performance Communications. As a 30-year veteran in PR, marketing, and branding, she has worked with senior leaders at Fortune 500 companies. As the author of 7 business books, Deidre shares stories and advice to navigate changing consumer behavior and an evolving media. Her book, Answers for Modern Communicators, was recently named by Book Authority as one of the 100 best storytelling books of all time. She has been blogging at PR Strategies for over 10 years, and she's also the host of a podcast, Women Worldwide, which is in its 6th year and has nearly 2 million downloads. Deidre is also the co-author of A Whisper From Noelle, her first children's book, written with her husband, Mark Scribola. Together, they honor the memory of Mark's daughter and Deidre's stepdaughter, Noelle, with a story focused on family values and children and parents exploring feelings together. Deidre has previously taught PR and social media courses online in the classroom for NYU, UMass at Amherst, Rutgers University, and Fairleigh Dickinson University. Deidre is also developing online courses for the Feel Academy, focused on helping professionals to face fears, engage with empathy, live with ethics, and unleash love through their communications and all of their business interactions. So welcome, Deidre.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
So it's very nice to have you here. So my first question, which is maybe not necessarily what one would think of as the first question, but I couldn't get my mind past this. What would you like to write a book with your husband?
Oh my gosh, it was a really good process. So we work a lot together anyway. Mark has always been very supportive of my business. And you know that what they say about those husband and wife teams, you never know what you're going to get. But I found the process with him to be super easy because when I publish my business books, I do everything. Even though I work with a big publisher since 1999, I had mentioned that before. A lot of the process, the editing, going back and forth with the production teams, the marketing. When it came to this book, I wrote the story. We came up with the idea. I meditated, wrote the story literally in my journal, shared it with Mark. I finessed it, and then he just ran with the process. It was wonderful and called me into these meetings with the publisher. And I thought, oh my goodness, I wish it was that way all the time. So long story short, it was an absolute pleasure to publish this book with him.
That's amazing. I just couldn't wrap my head trying to write a book with my husband together. And I was like, how does that work?
Well, and he was great. He found the illustrator. He worked with the illustrator. I just, I was there in the background. I was there for support and approvals, but he did a lot of heavy lifting. So it was wonderful.
Great. I mentioned this earlier, but I would like for everybody to know that if you have any questions for Deidre, we will be opening this up for the audience Q&A at the end of the question and answers. And you can post any questions in the Q&A chat box, or you can raise your hand and we'll pass the mic over to whoever wishes to ask questions or comments. So what inspired you to write the book?
Well, it's interesting because Mark and I, if you had asked us years ago if we were ever going to write a children's book, we would have said, what? No. However, it was after my stepdaughter Noelle passed away, and writing the book was a part of our grieving process. There were two things that really happened. Mark was trying to think of a way to honor Noelle, and it wasn't coming right away. And after his dad died last year, he had vivid memories of Noelle and her grandpa reading all of the time. Noelle loved storytelling when she was little. And Mark would walk into her bedroom, and Grandpa and Noelle would either be reading stories over and over again, or they'd fall asleep reading stories. And he came to me and said, what a great way to honor Noelle, because stories are family, it's bonding. She loves story time. And what was interesting, something was happening for me when Noelle passed away. My grieving process was trying to understand what millennials, Noelle was 24, so she was a millennial, what they were thinking and feeling. So I launched this passion project, which really became a study in and of itself. And I asked over 100 millennials to share their thoughts around what they valued, how they wanted to be perceived, how do you build a relationship, what do you need from the people around you? And they shared so many thoughts and feelings. And I looked at all the data, and what they were sharing really lumped into some clear buckets. And it was all about, they wanted people to be open and inclusive. They really wanted caring and kindness and empathy. They were looking for truth and to be able to trust and love. And I thought, stepping back, all of this is all feelings, this is all values. Where does this start? In the home. We married the children's book with everything that we learned from millennials about feel, and that's where the story starts, with that. So it's all about feel and feelings and exploring them together.
So when it comes to Feel and the Feel Academy, how did you come across the organization, or how did that all start?
Well, Feel Academy comes out of that same study that I did with the millennials. After looking at everything, I realized that if millennials want this so much, and they're a generation now who's in the workforce, Gen Z is on their heels, that feel is really important. But how do you know if you feel first? And feels, what I described before in the buckets: facing fears, engage with empathy, use ethics and good judgment, and unleash the love. That's an acronym. It's FEEL. That's what the study taught me. So I built a test so that anybody could take the test, any professional, to see how much they feel first in their communications. And I've been gathering data now for about a year and a half. I have over 9,000 answers in a data.
Wow.
Yeah, so from that, I'm developing courses to help professionals to face fears and be more open, to be more empathetic, to be ethical and use good judgment and unleash their love. And what's ironic is that teaching that to professionals, it is difficult. If it starts in the home early, it would be a lot easier. And that's why we want to bring feel into the home, because that's where it starts. And reading is a great way to do that with your children.
Absolutely. This was my next question, but I'm going to attribute this to an anonymous attendee. You have written 7 books to date. So while this is your first children's book, are some of the messages in A Whisper from Noelle also relevant to the business community? Actually,
that's a great question. Yes. So because the book, even though it's about a little girl, she is tuning in and hearing whispers from Noelle. And it is all about, what does it mean to feel, how do I know what it means to trust and be truthful? It's all, if you think about it, the feel model that I explained is really in this book, but it's more an opportunity. So the business community, all those parents out there who are professionals, I think it's the message that says we need to tune in to our children and feel together. And when you're listening and you're present and everybody is sharing feelings and facing fears together, and there's caring and kindness and love and truth, that means that you're going to grow together and really experience those wonderful bonding moments. I think one of the biggest things is that it's difficult today as a parent, as a professional, to tune out everything that's around us. And what I found as a parent for many years was that I thought I was present. So there's a message wrapped in for all the professionals, maybe like me, or maybe you really are aware all the time that when you're with your children, sometimes the external distracts us. And if we're distracted externally, then we're not able to tune into the signals that are going on within the home as much as maybe we should be or we want to be. We're missing moments, and you don't get those moments back.
That's very true. As a millennial myself, and now my husband and I have a 10-month-old, and just thinking about how quickly things have, how quickly time has passed, and we're in a pandemic where we're forced to, we're forced to be home and always with him, and it still is hard to keep in mind being present because your mind is at all these other places. And when you're working from home, it can be difficult to kind of turn that switch off and be present with, our son. But it was also bringing back thoughts about, how my parents were when they raised me. And so it's a very interesting topic to reflect on as again, a millennial and as a new first-time parent. So,
well, it's good. It's so good that you said to reflect, because this is all about self-awareness and emotional intelligence. If we don't have self-awareness, if we're not reflecting, if we're not in tune with our own emotions, then we certainly can't manage anyone else. And what you said about COVID and being home, we're working, we're parenting, the switch is being flipped very quickly back and forth, where when you drive to the library or you go to the office, you have that little bit of time to say, okay, now I'm getting into my home mode, or you're riding a train back from the city and you're going home. That really helps to kind of leave the day behind a little bit. And when you're home all the time and your children are home or they're not going to school, there's just switching back and forth. And that's tough.
Yeah, very much. This is very timely. We have another question. Is the feel model which you developed equally applicable across multiple generations? Does it work as effectively with millennials as, let's say, baby boomers?
I think feel is the connector between all the generations. So when I look at the workforce, if you think about it, there will be 5 different generations in the workforce by 2025. And a lot of companies now are looking at pieces of my model. So you remember the acronym. It's the face of the fears, which is open, the empathy, the ethics, the love. Some companies are very much focused now on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some companies are focused on the transparency and some things on the ethics side. Some companies, maybe they're hitting 3 parts of the model, but not all parts. And it's really important in order to get to a place of genuine relationships and trust in the workplace. I believe from the research that's being done and the data that I'm pulling from my test, that it takes all 4 parts for a company really to have everybody have trust, and it's a part of the culture and the DNA, and that's how the culture grows, and how people can really work together and be productive and to have a great team.
Do you think that the FEEL model also can help bridge those gaps between people who are, say, all in the same workplace, and there are some millennials, there are some baby boomers, and do you think that it can help bridge some of the I'll say cultural differences from being of the different generations?
I think so, because the model teaches you, especially in the face fears part, to question, to not use the tip of your nose perspective, which sometimes happens when we all have so many things going on, and it's knee-jerk reactions, right? We all have them because it's a busy workplace, there's pressures, there's deadlines, you have bosses that need things. And when that happens, we're more quick to take what could be a gift of feedback as something that's a harsh criticism. So the FEEL model creates a roadmap. When you use the model, when you take the test, you learn to create a roadmap for yourself so that you can, as a matter of fact, the test recommends exercises that you can do to increase your level of FEEL. And the reason being is, sometimes we think that we're more open than we are. Sometimes we think that we're more empathetic than we are. And I could go down the line. I've had professionals say to me, Deirdre, I really thought I was being empathetic, but after learning and reading about your research and what you've written, that I'm on the bottom scale of empathy. I'm only at cognitive empathy, where you talk about emotional empathy and compassionate empathy, which is the highest level. And it's interesting because we just don't know. So I think if everybody applies themselves, if we're all willing to be vulnerable and work at it, then it will help any generation and all generations to have better conversations and interactions, especially in the workplace.
Okay. We have another question from everybody's anonymous with asking these questions tonight. How does the FEEL model potentially add to a company or firm's bottom line?
Well, so adding to the bottom line, first let's think of the bottom line. So I deal in the business of communication, and all communication ties to higher level goals. And one of those goals is about the way that your employees work together and the productivity and the cost savings that you get from that. So if you are applying the FEEL model and you are building trust and you are bridging between different teams that work together and cross-functionally, and they are being more effective and efficient, that will affect your bottom line. At the same time, if you think about it, you're bringing people in, you're focusing on areas that really help them to grow and excel. You will lessen your turnover. If you're a company that feels and you help your employees to do that, you're showing emotional intelligence and your leaders are bought into this, then you're not going to have people flocking. So one of the statistics that came out of the Deloitte millennial study was that 79% of millennials would jump ship. They would leave their current organizations for an organization that's more empathetic. That says it right there. You would cut down on your turnover very quickly and let those millennials grow within your organization if you focused on FEEL.
So your book, A Whisper from Noelle, definitely addresses the FEEL model. And how would you recommend, as far as some examples of things that parents can do with their children to kind of encourage the talking about feelings and having empathy, ethics, and good judgment. Because, you know, as from reading this, it's obvious to me as a parent, you know, and they're very important lessons that you want to instill. And while reading is a great starting place, what other thoughts have you had, like, since the book has been published, and reflecting on it?
Well, I think starting with the book, even just the messaging, the big words, how Ashley Ann wants to know, what is feel? What does it mean to be truthful? Even exploring that with your children. What does feel mean to you? What is love? Ashley Ann doesn't know what it means. What is love? What happens if I think I know what love is? And then the angel tells her, well, what do you think of when you hear love? She says, I think of my mommy and my daddy, and I'm really happy. So it is having literally conversations about what things mean, and letting your children know that they can share any feelings. And it's not just the happy feelings, it could be the scared feelings, it could be confused feelings. But I think that comes down to, even before you can get to what can we do together? Is it going to be reading more? Is it going to be walking, going to the park? Is it maybe we're going to be hiking? You have to carve out the time. So, well, actually, step number one is to make it the priority, carve out the time on your calendar so that it is dedicated time, no smartphones, no devices, TV's off in the background. And then it's figuring out, what is it that we like to do as a shared experience? And I'm sure children have lots of ideas about what that is. And I'm sure parents do too. But I think starting with making it the priority and making sure that you're aware and present is a good place. And then you're going to figure it out together.
I like how in the book, all of the, there are so many, I'm trying to flip to the first one, pictures of the family doing activities together. And Ashley Ann is looking at the family picture that's posted on her bedroom wall, and they're getting ice cream and they're going to the beach together. And you can tell that, everybody is clearly present with the imagery and the illustrations. So,
and also, one thing I want to mention, because Ashley Ann is also very present. She is listening and tuning in. This whole book, the message is tune in. Ashley Ann is tuning in, hearing this little angel and these whispers. And there's also a part in the book where the angel says to her, you're going to hear this little voice inside of you. And it's going to tell you, it steers you from what's good and what's not good. And you might not know this voice now, but you're going to know it later. You have to be really tuned in to hear messages. So she's tuned in, her mom is tuned in, you can tell her family's tuned in. Yeah. And that's just really important. I think that's the main message. Everybody, take some time and tune in.
So I'm sorry, I'm looking at more questions and seeing which makes more sense to ask first. I think, how about, we haven't addressed this question yet, but this person wrote, what about teenagers? Teens sometimes can be difficult to talk to. What advice can you provide to bridge the gap with teens? And I think also another question is getting them to be present and not their faces in their telephones or TV screens.
That's a really hard one, because you're right, they're in their screens. Sometimes it's more than one screen. I do remember being in the kitchen, just yelling to everybody, do you want baked potatoes or French fries, and then my phone would go off. Nobody would ever talk, right? The pure example. But I think that for teenagers, there's always a line where you're questioning too much. What do you say? What don't you say? If you're in a safe space of just carving time and spending time, more likely than not, if somebody wants to share with you, they will. Myself, as a parent, what I noticed, if I was sort of open and when you're spending time, things would be shared with me. It wasn't forced, but it comes from knowing that you are going to have regular time together. It comes from sometimes being vulnerable yourself. And I liken that, sharing. Children have to know that we have feelings. And that's actually our next book, where Grandpa Don't Worry, Ashley Ann experiences that Grandpa is feeling some things. And, that's the book on empathy. So I really do think that there has to be some kind of a level of understanding and trust. It does go back to the study, what millennials are looking for. But in order to have that trust, there is a level of vulnerability that has to happen. And we walk a fine line, but I think that's one way, is to, if you're open, then somebody else can be open with you. And for parents, if you're spending time a lot, whether it's on the phone or whatever you're doing, and of course, if you're in business, it is mimicked. It's mimicked from early on. And, we all do it, but there's always time to change and to recognize. And I think that's the most important part.
I think it's the same anonymous attendee who asked the question wrote, "Thank you, that was helpful."
Oh, well, thank you. It's a tough question. It really is, because,
yes,
we were all teenagers at one time,
yes.
Although it seems a very long time ago.
I'm even starting to think of, some of my friends' children who are, between 1 and 2, and they mimic absolutely everything. You have to watch what you say, and it really does start early with being able to open.
There was such a cute little Instagram video that somebody shared with me about this little girl, couldn't have been more than 3 years old. And she had her little baby in a baby carriage, and she was pushing her baby, but she was talking on the phone. And then and then all of a sudden she says, hold on. It sounds like, hold on. She puts her phone down and she covers the baby with a blanket, and then she starts pushing again. So, the good news was she stopped, she covered the baby, right? Because that was the right thing to do. But she was still on the phone as she was walking her baby. So she got that from somewhere, mimicking her mommy.
This is an interesting question. How can teachers use the feel model in the classroom? Because I definitely feel that this book would be very good in a children's room classroom.
Well, it can be used to help children the same way. I would take, at the very end of the book, you see the angel Noelle, and it shows the feel model. Face fears, have empathy, live with ethics, and unleash your love. And I think that's what teachers should talk about. It's almost helping children to build their own roadmap when it comes to fears. What are fears? What frightens us? How do you move past them? What can you do? The exercises in the test are for adults and professionals, but at every level, because college students have used this test. My field test has been brought into college classrooms. And I've had students come and say, because of the field model, because of your test, I faced my fears. I was my group team leader. I had never done that before. It wasn't easy, but I did it. So if it can be in college, you can bring it down to high school. You can bring it down to middle school. You just have to change the way that you look at the roadmap and what some of the questions are to address what feel means and how people experience fears, and how to be more open and step out of the comfort zone, or how to be more caring and kind and understanding. What do we need to do with our peers if we're kids in a classroom? How can we, you mean stealing that pencil is not good judgment? Whatever it is. And how do we show more love and passion? What does that mean? And what can we do? All that can be explored at any age.
Interesting. I was having a conversation with my children's librarian on Tuesday, and she was going through the parenting section, which was his own little bookcase, and she was mentioning how, you know, a lot of the books on her parenting shelf were not necessarily how-to advice, but they were, you know, picture books with stories trying to, you know, teach different either coping skills or what have you. And majority of them had to do either with grief or potty training. So yes. So it was interesting to kind of see that there were kind of two ends of the spectrum, but not too many other books that, and there's probably about 30 of them that explored other topics such as, you know, love, or, you know, how to have good judgment, you know, whether or not to trust people. I didn't even see any books about like stranger danger, which was very much a big thing when I was in school, when I was a little kid.
Sure.
So it's important. I personally feel as a librarian that we need more books like this to try to, you know, children do learn through stories, and to bring the point home that, you know, it's okay to have feelings and to talk about different things. It's not, you know, it's not just a, you know, either huge emotions like grief, or, you know,
Right.
just the simple things like potty training. So
Yeah, I think that sometimes if we are just looking for those big emotions, we also skip a lot of moments of any kind of emotion that clues us into how a child is feeling, how they're doing, what they're experiencing. And I do think kids want to share. They do. They come into this world bundles of energy in most cases. Some are quieter than others, but it's almost they're shaped. They're molded by their experiences in the home. They're shaped and molded by experiences in the community, and then it goes into the school system. And somehow, somewhere along the line, as you're shaped, you might lose all that wonderful curiosity. We don't want that to happen. And that should just be pulled out and embraced. And, you know, parents do this. You know, this certainly, there are so many incredible parents who take the time, who are there. I mean, this book recognizes that too. It's all about the bonding. But I do think it's those little moments that make a difference. And that needs to be brought out.
Absolutely. Another anonymous attendee wants to know, what feedback have you had from children who have read the book with their families?
We've had really good feedback. Feedback in the sense of it's a beautiful book, the pictures. So parents mostly have done the reviews about their children, that the illustrations are beautiful. the big words are helpful. Children love to read the big words and look back, the big words as in the ones that we pull out, like feel and kindness and caring and special. Yes, that's fun for children to go over and to learn. And then it's just a story that helps people to share. And that, one person wrote that sometimes you don't think about some of those messages. And after reading it, it was discussed after, like even the message of how do you trust yourself? What does that actually mean? So I think it's been a good response. It's for a good cause. That's another message that we've received, feedback, because we've set up a fund in Noelle's honor, and it's really all the proceeds from this book and the next book coming out, Grandpa Don't Worry, they go to the Noelle Scribola Outstanding Research Scholar Fund. And it's for psychology students who are doing research. And Noelle was the first recipient of this award, although it wasn't funded back then. And now we are funding it so that 2 students every single year receive a monetary award.
I just included the link for the attendees to be able to see.
Thank you. Yes, we want this to live on in her legacy.
I also do think that this, as you said, it has a lot of conversation starters in this book, and it's really important to think about that. So,
yeah, that's a good point, Elysse. It is a conversation starter, because sometimes we just think everybody knows what it is to feel. Everybody knows what it is to trust or to have empathy, caring, and kindness. But like I said, even with my professional peers, they didn't realize it. Wow, I really thought I had good judgment, but according to the test score, I didn't. So you never know. You have to open these things up.
Exactly. So you mentioned that you do have another children's book in the series coming out. Do you have any plans also to write more professionally based books? Yes,
actually. So not in contract yet, but there is another professional book coming. So moving into contract for that soon. And I'm very, very excited about that. But no spoilers there. I never say what those books are, literally, until the book goes into production. So, but that's coming. And it will be co-authored. So this will be another book in my Answers series, and I'm going to co-author it with an expert, which is really nice because then I can split the responsibilities, kind of like what I did with Mark. So I'll get a little help. And then the Grandpa book we're just looking at the final proofs, and that's going to go into what's in production now. It will go to print. And when you self-publish, so we use Outskirts Press, which is a self-publishing unit, it's a lot quicker. It takes about 5 or 6 months with a large publisher to get your book through production and get it to print. But with self-publishing, I think it's going to be out in a month, maybe a month and a half, which is great.
Oh, nice. That's a little insight to the publishing world.
Yeah, I've been down both paths. If anybody is interested in writing a book, there's a reason to use big publishers. There's a reason when you want to self-publish. I would say if you are looking to get something out more quickly, definitely self-publish. And you'd be surprised because a lot of people say, oh, self-publishing is so expensive. It's this, it's that. There are some reasonable packages. What you're really looking for is the ISBN number, Library of Congress seal, and the distribution. And pretty much you can navigate everything yourself if you find a really good artist to work with you.
Great. So those were all of my questions that I had for you were also asked by the audience and then some. Is there anybody who wants to raise their hand and comment or speak to Deidre or myself? I can unmute you.
I think everybody has a story in them. I really do. I just want to say that I work with authors and professionals all the time. And it's interesting because so many people do want to write a book, but they always say, oh, I don't think I can do it, or I don't know how. So I always say, everyone has a story, go for it. Because it's
face
just
your fears.
Face your fears. Absolutely. You'd be surprised what you can do. And even if it doesn't make it to a major publisher, maybe you self-publish it, maybe you leave it as a digital ebook, it becomes a part of your legacy. And someday your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will want to know who you are and what you were about. And I just think a book is a great way to leave that behind.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for coming to our library and giving this presentation. And I really appreciate you talking to us and all of the insight. I know, I feel like I walked away with a lot of information.
So it was great to chat with you and everybody. Thank you everyone for joining and for asking some really good questions. I hope that you all enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.